Good morning and welcome to the August 2024 open meeting, the Olympic edition of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda this morning?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good afternoon to you and good afternoon, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 3 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report in order to establish a missing and endangered persons event code that will provide law enforcement, EAS participants, and WEA providers with a means to quickly disseminate information pertaining to missing and endangered persons cases. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that would propose steps to protect consumers from the abuse of AI in robocalls and robotexts, alongside actions that clear the path for positive uses of AI, including its use to improve access to the telephone network for people with disabilities. Third, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that would propose and seek on comment on procedural measures to promote improved diligence when providers submit required information to the robocall mitigation database, technical validation solutions to identify data discrepancies in filings, and accountability measures to ensure and improve the overall quality of submissions in the robocall mitigation database. This is your agenda for today. Please note that item 4, a Media Bureau adjudication matter, and item 5, an enforcement action from the Enforcement Bureau, as listed on the July 31st Sunshine Notice, were adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. Today's first item is titled Wireless Emergency Alerts, Amendments to Part 11 of the Commission's Rules Regarding the Emergency Alert System, and will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and Alejandro Roark, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Now, before we hand it over to Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau Chief Alejandro Roark and the Bureau for the presentation, just 2 quick announcements. First, I just want to acknowledge that we moved this meeting from the morning to the afternoon to accommodate a whole bunch of canceled flights that fouled up my travel plans. And I just want to say I really, really appreciate everyone on the FCC staff who changed their schedules to accommodate that. I especially appreciate the generosity of my colleagues for making that happen. And before we get to the presentation from the Bureau, I want to acknowledge we have a special guest. I would like to introduce Lavina Willinez, who is the Amber Alert Coordinator for the Navajo Department of Police. And she's going to provide a presentation that is going to be included in our official record. Ms. Willinez is the first Amber Alert Coordinator for the Navajo Police Department, and she started her career with the Navajo Nation in 2016, working for the Department of Emergency Management. Now, the Navajo Nation has endured a lot during the pandemic, and that led her to being part of the Missing Persons Unit with the Navajo Police Department. And I am really thrilled that she is able to introduce her experiences today and talk to us about them. So, Ms. Willinez, I look forward to your remarks. I'd ask you to proceed, and afterwards, Mr. Roark will present the item. Let's hold on one second. We want to make sure we've got your voice.
You're off mute now.
Good afternoon.
All right, we heard you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lavina Willinez. I am a Tkachitni, which is Red Running to the Water People Clan, and born for Hansoy, which is born for Middle People Clan. I am from the Navajo Nation Reservation. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak about the importance of implementing the Missing Endangered Person Code. The Navajo Nation spans 27,000 square feet across 11 counties in 3 states, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. The Navajo Nation is the largest tribe in the United States with over 400,000 members. As of August 5th, 2024, there are 77 reported missing persons within the Navajo Nation, dating back to 1972. However, it is unknown how many others have not been reported to the Navajo Nation Police. Coordination with other public agencies, States is crucial when issuing wireless emergency alerts and emergency alert system notifications to locate missing individuals. The current WIA wireless emergency alert and emergency alert system has been used by the Navajo Nation and is proven to be highly effective and invaluable. Since the implementation in the early 2018, these systems have been successfully utilized to protect the lives of our people during critical emergencies and issuing Amber Alerts. The Navajo Nation has issued a total of 8 Amber Alerts, all of which have been resulted in the safe recovery of the children involved. We can apply this same approach to locate missing persons who do not meet the Amber Alert criteria. The public serves as their eyes and ears and their assistance. With their assistance, we can locate missing individuals more swiftly. The Missing Endangered Person Code will greatly assist the Navajo Nation and other tribes in situations where individuals go missing and are endangered. In such cases, time is of the essence in locating these individuals. Notifying the public through WIA and EAS systems ensures we use every available tool to assist families in finding their loved ones. The significance of Missing Endangered Person Code lies in the ability to utilize all resources to locate a missing loved one. Each time a Native person goes missing, we lose a part of our heritage and culture. It is crucial that we support one another in these efforts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today I'm pleased to put forth on behalf of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau a report and order that, if adopted, would revise our emergency alert system and wireless emergency alert rules to create a new event code for missing, endangered, and abducted persons. Specifically, the item before you will establish an MEP event code to assist law enforcement agencies nationwide in delivering alerts about missing and endangered individuals. This action will be especially beneficial to efforts to find the thousands of missing Native and Indigenous persons who disappear each year from their homes and communities. Before turning the presentation over to the Bureau staff, I would like to thank the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, the Offices of Communications Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, General Counsel, the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, and Disability Rights for their valuable assistance. I also was able to meet Lavina in person, and a lot of law enforcement officials. So again, just echo the gratitude for her remarks and for her hospitality. Joining me at the table today are Theodore Marcus, CGB Legal Advisor, and Wes Platt, Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, as well as Bambi Kraus, Chief of the Office of Native Affairs. Theo Marcus will present the item.
Thank you, Alejandro. Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, Commissioners. The Emergency Alert System, EAS, and Wireless Emergency Alerts, WEA system distribute tens of thousands of warnings to the public every year. These systems have been instrumental in the successful recovery of missing and endangered and abducted children through the use of a dedicated event code for child abduction emergencies that warrant Amber Alerts. The report and order now before you, if adopted, seeks to replicate this success for all persons, whether adults or children, who are missing and endangered but whose circumstances do not meet the criteria established for Amber Alerts by establishing a new MEP event code. In 2023, approximately 188,000 adults went missing in the United States. Although regional guidance exists in some places for emergency alerts in such cases, there is no uniformity or consistency in how the alerts are named, activated, or implemented. To address this need, the Ashanti Alert Act, which Congress adopted in 2018, requires the establishment of a national network to provide assistance to search efforts in such cases. Today's item furthers Congress's objective. Notably, the MEP event code will be particularly beneficial to tribal communities and other communities of color that have experienced crisis conditions of missing, murdered, and endangered people. American Indian and Alaska Native people are at a disproportionate risk of violence, murder, or vanishing, as are members of the Black community. Indeed, in 2020, Congress passed both Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act to highlight the need for increased law enforcement coordination in addressing violent crimes against American Indians and Alaska Natives. And in 2023, a resolution adopted by the National Congress of American Indians called upon the Commission to establish an MEP event code to enable a more rapid and coordinated response to incidents involving missing Indigenous persons. This report in order creates uniformity in the alert process to locate such individuals. It will facilitate the rapid dissemination of information about adults and children who have been reported missing to law enforcement agencies, media, and the public. The Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau recommends adoption of this report in order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Carr.
First of all, thank you, obviously, for the presentation, and thanks so much to the team for all the work on this. I mean, obviously, we should not have a system where we allow people to fall through the gaps. So I'm glad that we have picked up this item and are making sure that we have an alerting system that works in the modern era, and these improvements are a good step in the right direction. So thanks again to the team. It has my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks. Wait, let's hold and make sure we have your volume.
Can folks hear me now?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And first of all, thank you for your powerful testimony, Ms. Lavina Willie-Nez. One of the things I've prided myself on, of course, is the great work that the FCC has done in coordination, collaboration with law enforcement generally. And of course, in my time as a commissioner, have also met with a number of folks from Navajo Nation, and so look forward to continuing to work with you all here. When an Amber Alert flashes across your screen, you're immediately aware of 3 key pieces of information: that a child has gone missing, the identifying details of the child or suspect, and how to report potential sightings to law enforcement. And by alerting the surrounding public of the emergency, Amber Alerts have been instrumental in finding and safely returning children to their families. But they do have one critical limitation: they're only issued for children age 17 and under. And so just last year, as we heard, thousands of adults went missing or were endangered and fell outside of the criteria to issue an Amber Alert. And so today's order closes that critical gap, establishing a dedicated missing and endangered persons event code. It will assist law enforcement disseminating critical information. And this 3-letter MEP event code harmonizes emergency alerts nationwide, ensures the public is alerted and prepared to respond during these emergencies, and quite clearly, simply put, this order will save lives. While today's action is sure to benefit communities across the country, as we heard, including African American countries, communities of color, I want to highlight that it will have a profound impact on tribal communities whose members face a disproportionate risk of violence, murder, or vanishing. I've heard about this firsthand, the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous persons during my visit to the community of Bethel, Alaska, a remote community of 6,000 without major roads, reachable only by boat or plane. And I heard personally and heard directly from residents about the lack of communication services, the challenges of locating and safely recovering members of their community. Notably, the people of Bethel held a 3rd annual Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons People's March for Justice during the National Week of Action. All across the country, communities like Bethel are doing their part to raise awareness and end the crisis of violence. And so I'm glad that we are helping along with this. This order strengthens our commitment, empowering tribes to address this crisis and providing critical tools to locate and recover. Thank you to Native Public Media for their tremendous work and advocacy as well on this important issue, spurring this order. Truly, I look forward to your continued engagement. And thank you to CGB as well for their great hard work on this. It has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. No statement at this time.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Lavina Willie-Nez for your very compelling statement today and for joining us. So today we established an emergency alert code dedicated to help find persons that have gone missing. Our goal is to help communities and families that unfortunately experience the anguish of not knowing where their loved ones are. By establishing the Missing and Endangered Persons Alert Code, We also hope to address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous persons, which has afflicted Native communities for far too long. Native Americans constitute 2.5% of all missing person cases, despite comprising only 1.2% of the U.S. population. So a heartfelt thank you to the staff of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau for your work on this critical life-saving item, to the many organizations and advocates who encouraged us to take this step and offered comments, and to the chair and my fellow commissioners for making this code possible. And now I would like to share brief remarks in Spanish. Hoy establecemos una nueva alerta de emergencia dedicada a ayudar a encontrar personas desaparecidas. Nuestro objetivo es ayudar a las familias que viven la angustia de no saber dónde están sus seres queridos. Con esta medida, dentro de un año, las autoridades podrán mandar alertas a la comunidad y a sus teléfonos celulares y por radio y televisión cuando una persona esté extraviada. Esperamos que con esta decisión más personas pueden reunirse con sus seres queridos. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Last week, I was in Prior Lake, Minnesota, where I spoke to a group of women from tribal nations. It was a privilege to talk to them about the Federal Communications Commission, but to be honest, it was not immediately clear to those assembled why I was even present. This was not a group accustomed to having the leadership of a regulatory agency with responsibility for communications technology join them for their gathering. But I was there with a message of hope, because I believe we can do something to help address the crisis of missing, murdered, and Indigenous women and girls, and more broadly, the crisis of missing and endangered persons in Native communities. So I began my remarks by talking about what is universally true. That is, when a loved one goes missing, the distress is urgent and intense. It is an impossible mix of hope and despair. We hope for a swift return so that they come home unharmed and with a chance to return to some measure of normal. But we also despair because resources may not follow, and fear emerges that maybe your loved one does not matter enough, or that you will not be lucky enough to make a breakthrough in the critical day or two following their disappearance. It could break you. I know, just thinking about it as a mother. It is too much. I am fortunate that I can only imagine. Then I moved on to the facts. The Bureau of Indian Affairs estimates there are more than 4,000 cases of missing and murdered American Indian and Alaska Natives that are unsolved. According to the FBI, the numbers missing are more than 2.5 times their share of the United States population. And while there are new methods to collect data on missing and endangered tribal and Native people, the true magnitude of this problem is hard to capture through the data alone. But here's another fact. One of the most effective initiatives we have had to assist with the recovery of endangered kids are Amber Alerts. Amber Alerts have been around for nearly 3 decades. They now tell us on television, radio, and wireless phones when a child goes missing. So many young people have been safely found as a result of these alerts. In fact, as you just heard from Lavina Willie-Nez, her tribe had issued 8 Amber Alerts, and in all 8 instances, the missing child was successfully recovered. Amber Alerts demonstrate that there is a way to raise awareness when someone goes missing and increase the odds that we safely find them. But for an Amber Alert to go out, a missing person has to be 17 years old or younger. And roughly 1 in 3 missing persons reports today are for adults. We're talking about 188,000 people last year who went missing. But we do not have a tool on par with Amber Alerts to raise awareness and assist with recovery efforts of those 18 and older. I think it would make a difference if we did, because while only 1/3 of those who go missing are adults, they account for 70% of the people who are never found. So today we create a new code and emergency alert systems for television, radio, and wireless phones to help find those missing and endangered persons that fall outside of the criteria for Amber Alerts. This new capability, the Missing and Endangered Persons, or MEP alert code, will sound the alarm when people are missing and endangered, help raise awareness, and support recovery. Now, in developing this proposal, we received so many comments but the most powerful testimonies came from tribal communities. Their input, including from government-to-government consultations between tribal communities and our Office of Native Affairs and Policy, provided a voice for the missing and murdered. I want to thank Lavina Willie Nez, who is the Amber Alert Coordinator from the Navajo Department of Police, for her testimony supporting our efforts today. I also want to acknowledge the National Congress of American Indians for their work to pass a resolution to support the Commission establishing this new code. In addition, I want to acknowledge the efforts of members of Congress who have brought attention to this issue, including Senators Lujan, Schatz, Daines, Tester, Murkowski, and Cortez Masto. Our work also owes a huge debt of gratitude to Native Public Media for bringing this issue to our attention. So a big thank you to Loris Taylor of Native Public Media, who was instrumental in this effort, pressing us to understand the plight of missing and murdered Indigenous people, and urging us at the FCC to recognize we have the power to do something about it. We do. And as a result of the action we take today, we will save lives. I also want to acknowledge the staff responsible for this effort because we are really grateful for their contributions, including Alejandro Roark, Mark Stone, Aaron Garza, Theo Marcus, Wesley Platt, Christy Thornton, Bambi Kraus, Kara Voth, and Jamie Saloom from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Nicole McGinnis, Austin Randazzo, James Wiley, George Donato, Drew Moran, David Kirshner, Leon Kenworthy, and David Mumson from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Joy Ragsdale, Jocelyn James, and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. Andrew Wise, Cher Lee, Susan Lee, Emily Talaga, and Alex Yankovic from the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Doug Klein, William Huber, Anjali Singh, Susan Lee, and Erica Olson from the Office of General Counsel. And we will now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Protecting Consumers from Unwanted Artificial Intelligence Robocalls, and will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs. Once again, Alejandro Roark, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Welcome back. Mr. Roark, please proceed.
Thank you, and good afternoon again, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Over the past year, we have witnessed the often remarkable and sometimes worrisome abilities of artificial intelligence technologies to generate content. Today, I'm pleased to introduce, on behalf of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, an item that, if adopted, proposes timely protections for consumers against robocalls and robotexts that seek to abuse AI technologies to compromise consumers' privacy. Before turning the presentation over to the Bureau staff, I would love to thank the Wireline Competition Bureau, Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, the Media Bureau, the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Enforcement Bureau, and the Office of General Counsel for their valuable assistance. Joining me today at the table is Noah Cherry, Attorney Advisor in CGB's Consumer Policy Division, Wes Platt, Chief of the Consumer Policy Division, and Noah will present the item.
Thank you, Alejandro. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. I should say good afternoon. The Notice of Proposed Rulemaking before you proposes rules to protect consumers from potential abuse of emerging AI technologies as part of the Commission's ongoing efforts to protect consumers from unwanted and illegal telephone calls and text messages under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, also known as the TCPA. Consistent with the statutory authority Congress granted to the Commission under the TCPA, the proposed rules in this item would further empower consumers through transparency and consent to determine whether they want to receive AI-generated calls and texts. First, the item proposes to define AI-generated call as a call that uses any technology or tool to generate an artificial or pre-recorded voice or text using computational technology or other machine learning, including predictive algorithms and large language models, to process natural language and produce voice or text content to communicate with a called party over an outbound telephone call. Second, the item proposes disclosure requirements for callers seeking to make AI-generated calls and text messages. This means that callers using AI-generated artificial or pre-recorded voice messages would be required to make clear and conspicuous disclosures that the consumer consents to receive AI-generated calls, and must also make such disclosure at the beginning of each call to disclose that the called party is using AI technology. the calling party. Similarly, callers making auto-dialed text messages that include AI-generated content would need to provide clear and conspicuous disclosure that the consumer consents to receive AI-generated content. Next, the item seeks to promote access to telephone services by individuals with disabilities. Specifically, the item proposes to exempt from the TCPA's requirements artificial or pre-recorded voice calls made by an individual with a speech or hearing disability using any technology, including artificial intelligence technologies, designed to facilitate the ability of such individuals to communicate over the telephone. Finally, the item includes a notice of inquiry that requests comment on the development and availability of call detection, alerting, and blocking technologies aimed at stopping potentially fraudulent and/or AI-generated calls based on real-time analysis of voice call content. Specifically, we ask about the potential benefits and privacy implications of these technologies. The Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much to the team. AI is a very frothy, hot topic in Washington and I guess headlines across the country these days. And predictably, there's then sort of a lot of regulation that can follow after it. And so I think we have to sort of proceed in a careful way. What I've sort of said, not famously apparently, is that we need to find the middle bowl of porridge on this. I don't believe in no regulation of AI, and at the same time, I think there's risk of overdoing it early on. I think in the main, a lot of the concerns I have with AI regulation are sort of separate from this item. This item, for the most part, focuses in on a particular statute and implementing that statute. But when it comes to that broader regulation of AI, I think we need to sort of have a couple of guardrails there. One, I think we shouldn't be regulating AI based purely on sort of speculative harms that aren't showing up in the real world. I think we need to be careful that we don't adopt AI-specific regulations when the concern isn't limited to things that appear in the AI space alone. And I think third, we need to make sure that we continue to support U.S. innovation and leadership. And again, those are my sort of broader concerns that, again, in the main are sort of to the side of this particular item. Here, I did have some concerns, but they were able to be addressed by some changes that were made along the way, and I appreciate the chair and my colleagues for doing that, and I'll be voting to approve today. So thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman calls it the steam engine of the mind. Jamie Dimon, chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, compares it to the printing press and to the internet. Computer scientist Andrew Ng has reached even bigger, calling it the new electricity. And so we may not fully know what AI is yet, but we do know that it is momentous and that it is here to stay. So clearly something, this momentous is not the purview of one agency alone. And so I've long said that AI requires a whole of government approach, and the whole of government has been hard at work. The Biden-Harris administration's landmark executive order charged agencies and offices across the government with exploring the role that AI plays within their area of expertise. And so agencies from Department of Homeland Security to the Small Business Administration have dug in, issuing reports, launching rulemakings, seeking input, funding projects. Here at the FCC, we issued the notice of inquiry that commenced this docket. In February, of course, we issued a declaratory ruling making clear that calls using voice cloning technology are subject to the requirements of the TCPA. In May 2024, we issued an NAL against the orchestrator of one of the carriers of a voice cloning robocall scheme. Today, we propose that parties using AI-generated content in robocalls, robotexts, both obtain consent for that use generally and disclose each use specifically. And so critically, we also propose protections to ensure that these requirements do not limit the development of the positive uses of AI that are helping people with disabilities, in particular, that are using our telephone networks. And so we seek further comment on the development of AI tools to detect and block spam calls as well. This work is not done in a vacuum. In fact, among others, the Federal Trade Commission filed comments in this docket. That sister agency shared the results of its own voice cloning challenge, which was an open challenge to the public to develop products, policies, procedures to protect consumers from AI-enabled voice cloning, like the ones that we at the FCC have seen and acted upon. And so the 4 challenge winners demonstrated from academia to industry how they're working to develop tools to protect consumers. And so make no mistake, voice cloning gives fraudsters a potent weapon. But, today shows across the government, from our consent and disclosure proposals today to the FTC's funding and technology to mitigate the risk of voice cloning, we are hard at work, shoulder to shoulder, to protect and empower the American people. So thank you to the FCC staff who worked on this item. Each of you, I think, is a member of that government-wide team working hard to understand and address the role of AI. Thank you to the chairwoman for continuing the FCC's hard work here in this arena. The item has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Starks. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'm willing to approve this item overall, and I want to thank the Chairwoman's office for working effectively and in good faith with my team to include my suggested edits. However, I must only concur as to the portion of the notice of inquiry relating to active monitoring of phone calls. The idea that the Commission would put its imprimatur on even the suggestion of ubiquitous third-party monitoring of telephone calls for the putative purpose of safety is, in my opinion, beyond the pale. Thank you.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. I'm going to have longer remarks after the next item is presented, but for now I would like to thank the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau for your ongoing contributions to protecting consumers and to help eliminate unwanted robocalls and robotexts.
Thank you, Commissioners. Artificial intelligence has become powerful enough to mimic human voices and create lifelike images. Facing a rising tide of disinformation, about 3/4 of Americans say they are concerned about misleading AI-generated content. That is why the FCC has focused its work on AI by grounding it in a key principle of democracy, and that's transparency. Earlier this year, when a fraudulent campaign targeted voters in New Hampshire using AI-generated voice cloning to impersonate President Biden and tell them not to vote, we acted fast. We issued a declaratory ruling that made clear that artificial or pre-recorded voice robocalls using AI voice cloning technology violate the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. In this effort, we partnered with state attorneys general, including the New Hampshire Attorney General, who is one of 49 state attorneys general who have signed on to a memorandum of understanding to work with this agency on junk robocalls. This ruling we made, it matters, because it gives our state colleagues the right to go after bad actors behind these calls and seek damages under the law. Then we worked with carriers to trace those responsible for this calling campaign. When we found the carrier behind it, we immediately sent a cease and desist letter and notified all other carriers to go ahead and stop carrying their traffic. We then took 2 enforcement actions. We proposed a $6 million fine for the party responsible for the scam calls and proposed a $2 million fine for the carrier that put these junk calls on the line and apparently failed to follow our call authentication rules. Then last month, I wrote to the largest carriers and asked questions about just what they were doing to keep AI-generated fake calls off our phone lines. They shared their plans to identify and block suspicious calls and the work that they're doing to address the growing use of AI by scammers seeking to reach us on our phones. We have made these responses public on our website today. These efforts, which are grounded in transparency, continued last week when the FCC took a major step to guard against AI being used by bad actors to spread chaos and confusion in our elections. We propose that political advertisements that run on television and radio should simply disclose if AI is being used. I think if a campaign uses AI to create an ad, as the voter, viewer, and listener, you have a right to know. The concern about these technology developments is real, and rightfully so. But if we focus on transparency and taking swift action when we find fraud, I think we can look beyond the risks of these technologies and harness the benefits. Today, we propose rules that would take another step towards transparency. We require callers and texters to make clear when they are using AI-generated technology. That means before any one of us gives our consent for calls from companies and campaigns, they need to tell us if they are using this technology. It also means that callers using AI-generated voices need to disclose that at the start of a call. I think this kind of transparency is important. And I think it's also important to wrestle this technology for good. So today we also ask how people with speech or hearing disabilities might use AI voice technologies. And we continue to ask questions about how we can harness the benefits of AI to detect scams on our networks before they ever reach us on our phones. So we have more work to do, but I'm an optimist and I believe all of this is possible. I also believe this kind of transparency is what we need to build a digital future that works for everyone. So let's get to it. Thank you to the robocall response team for their work. I also want to thank the staff responsible for this effort, including Mark Stone, Aaron Garza, Wesley Platt, Zach Champ, Richard Smith, Noah Cherry, Kristen Thornton, Jerusha Burnett, Susie Rosen Singleton, Michael Scott, Joshua Mendelson, and Diane Burstein from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Melina Barzilai, Erica Olson, Richard Mallon, Elliot Tarloff, and Wade Lindsay from the Office of General Counsel. Andrew Wise, Susan Lee, Michelle Schaefer, Stephen Rosenberg, and Douglas Galby from the Office of Economics and Analytics. Caitlin Barbas, Daniel Stepanovich, and Christy Thompson from the Enforcement Bureau. Jim Schlichting and Maureen Bizko from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Callie Coker, Jonathan Lecter, and Liz Drugula from the Wireline Competition Bureau. Edward Carlson from the Office of International Affairs. Lori Marber, Holly Sauer, Maria Malarkey, Carriara Ortiz, Hillary DeNigro, and Zach Ross from the Media Bureau. Jocelyn James and Joy Rogsdale from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. It's a lot because there are a lot of issues. And we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve in part, concur in part.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Improving the Effectiveness of the Robocall Mitigation Database, Amendment of Part 1 of the Commission's Rules Concerning Practice and Procedure, Amendment of Course Registration System, and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would propose and seek comment on additional steps filers should be required to take to ensure the accuracy of information submitted to the Robocall Mitigation Database and to ensure that such information remains accurate and up to date. I'd like to thank the entire Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues across the agency. Joining me at the table are Liz Dragula, Jody May, Zach Ross, and Jesse Goodwin. Jesse will represent the item.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Illegal robocalls cause billions of dollars each year in consumer fraud, not to mention the losses suffered by consumers due to the lost time and attention and diminished confidence in the nation's telephone network. For this reason, protecting Americans from illegal robocalls remains the Commission's top consumer protection priority. The Robocall Mitigation Database is a critical tool in these efforts, helping to ensure compliance with the Commission's STIR/SHAKEN caller ID authentication and robocall mitigation rules, and protect the public from harms caused by illegal robocalling campaigns. Information submitted to the Robocall Mitigation Database by providers must therefore be complete, accurate, and up to date. This notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would propose and seek comment on additional procedural steps, technical validation solutions, and accountability measures to ensure and improve the quality of submissions in the Robocall Mitigation Database. Specifically, if adopted, the notice of proposed rulemaking would propose and seek comment on additional steps filers should be required to affirmatively take to ensure the accuracy of information submitted to the Robocall Mitigation Database, and to ensure that such information remains accurate and up to date over time. The notice of proposed rulemaking would also seek comment on requiring providers to remit a filing fee for submissions to the Robocall Mitigation Database, and any technical solutions that the Commission could deploy to validate data and submissions and flag discrepancies before they are accepted by the Robocall Mitigation Database. Finally, the notice of proposed rulemaking would propose establishing a separate base forfeiture amount for submitting false or inaccurate information to the Robocall Mitigation Database, or failing to keep information up to date, and would propose to authorize downstream providers to permissively block traffic by robocall mitigation database filers that have been given notice that their robocall mitigation plans are facially deficient and that fail to correct these deficiencies within 48 hours. The Bureau recommends adoption of this notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. It's pretty simple. Illegal robocalls are bad, and cracking down on them is a good thing, but it takes a lot of diligent effort, and that's really spearheaded by this team right here. So thanks so much to the team for your hard work. That's my support.
Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for the hard work of the team. Echo those statements. Obviously, the robocall mitigation team has done exceptional work in us better helping them, giving them more accountability. Transparency is nothing but a good step. So this has my support. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. No statement at this time.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Robocalls and robotexts are the #1 complaint that consumers raise with the FCC. We agree they are incredibly frustrating. That is why we continuously work to combat unwanted robocalls and robotexts. Today, we take 2 actions in that line of work. First, we voted on proposals to ensure that artificial intelligence is harnessed to protect consumers from harm, rather than amplify the risks they experience in the robocall and robocall context. AI technologies can bring both new challenges and opportunities to combat this scourge, and responsible and ethical implementation of AI technologies is crucial to strike the right balance. I'm glad that we are seeking comments on ways that consumers can become aware when they are receiving communications generated with artificial intelligence. We serve consumers best when we arm them with information. And I look forward to hearing from leaders in technology, consumers, and industry as we develop a record in that proceeding. Second, we now vote on improving the robocall mitigation database, a tool that helps us ensure compliance with rules to mitigate illegal robocall campaigns. Whether improving our existing databases or exploring the role of AI, dedicated staff at the FCC works hard to mitigate unwanted robocalls and robotexts with every tool at our disposal and continuously looks for new ways to end this menace to consumers. So I commend the staff of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, the Wireline Competition Bureau, and all the staff at the agency for your hard work to protect consumers.
Thank you, Commissioners. The bad actors behind robocalls are relentless. To stop them, we need to be just as tenacious. That is why today we kick off a rulemaking to make the robocall mitigation database more accurate, effective, and secure. In the 3 years since its launch, the robocall mitigation database has become an important tool that helps the FCC and our law enforcement partners keep tabs on carriers and what they are doing to stop junk robocalls. But of course, there is room for improvement. So here we seek comment on ways to make sure filings in this database are up to date and authenticated. We also ask about penalties for false and inaccurate information. This is not the only update we are working on to keep this junk off the line. Just last week, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network so we can at long last get access to Bank Secrecy Act information to track the different business entities that are set up to flood us with unwanted calls and texts. When coupled with the work of the Industry Traceback Group and the 49 state attorneys general partnering with us, I think we can make real progress stopping the scammers behind these schemes. But to get the job done, we will need Congress to fix the gaping loophole left by the Supreme Court in its decision narrowing the definition of auto dialer and reducing consumer protection under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. We also need to make sure that when this agency issues big fines for illegal robocalls, we can take the bad actors responsible to court and not just rely on our colleagues at the Department of Justice to do so. All right, I want to thank the robocall response team again and the staff who worked on this rulemaking, including Eric Beath, Callie Coker, Elizabeth Dragula, Jesse Goodwin, Trent Harkrader, Jody May, Chiara Ortiz, Zachary Ross, and Lisa Zana from the Wireline Competition Bureau, David Firth and Jeffrey Goldthorpe from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Jerusha Burnett and Christy Thornton from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Loyani Gal, Alexander Hobbs, Rakesh Patel, Daniel Stepanisic, and Christy Thompson, and Jane Van Benton from the Enforcement Bureau, Michelle Ellison, Andrea Kelly, Richard Mallon, Eric Olson, Anjali Singh, Elliot Tarloff, and Derek Yeo from the Office of General Counsel, Chelsea Fallon, Eugene Kiselev, Julia McHenry, and Stephen Rosenberg from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Daniel Daly, Alan Hill, Juan Liu, Tadel Shifra, and Mark Stevens from the Office of the Managing Director, Katie Gorshak and Will Wilquist from the Office of Media Relations, Jim Ballagher and Brian Moulton from the Office of Legislative Affairs, and Michael Gusso, Jocelyn James, Shauna Wilkerson, and Sanford Williams from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. All right, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item's adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Okay, we're doing this in record time. Would any of my colleagues like to make announcements at this time? Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. Last open meeting, I announced one of my legal advisors was departing my office, but thankfully staying here in the building, and now we have that position refilled, which is great news. A lot of folks here know Danielle Thuman, who worked for me for about 2.5 years, starting in 2021, and then left for the private sector. She'll be returning to my office later this month. We'll do a sort of a formal announcement when she's officially back on board, but wanted to provide that notice. Danielle was a fabulous legal advisor for me when she was here, so we're really glad to have her back. She first joined my office from the DC office of Wilkinson Barker Nauer. She went to undergrad at UVA and then earned her JD at Catholic University, my law school alma mater as well. And so we're really glad to welcome her back to the office, and we'll have a formal statement when she officially starts up.
Commissioner Starks, any announcements?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And of course, we'll look forward to working with Danielle again, Commissioner Carr. So glad to hear about her selection there. It is that time of the season for me to say goodbye to my summer interns. They have been a particularly good and close group that I see, and like my fellow commissioners, I spoke broadly with the interns collectively as a group, and so look forward to great things from the broader intern group, but wanted to say a special thank you to my interns. They've done great work for me. That's Caitlin Lindstrom, who's a rising 3L at American University School of Law. She's also my early career diversity initiative intern. Thank you to Liana Dumang, a rising 3L at George Mason Law School. Thank you to Lathan Ois, a rising 2L at Georgetown Law School. And then, of course, thank you to Kaylee Lauter, who's a rising 3L there at the University of Colorado. I'm always watching interns. I see that you didn't stand up. Please stand up, rise, and be recognized there. Thank you to my intern crew. Thank you.
Look at Commissioner Starks monitoring from afar. All right, Commissioner Symington, any announcements?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I don't think there's the need for any remote monitoring here.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
So I'd also like to thank my departing interns. First of all, we have one, Joe Verde, who's been with us since September, and so we've had the chance to do all kinds of great work with him. Just a little background on Joe. He's at Brooklyn Law, JD expected 2026. He got his undergraduate degree in political science and government, and then also in literature, so very well-rounded from Baruch College. He's fluent in Italian, which is more than I can say. And then he was also selected to be the 1L delegate for the Brooklyn Law Student Bar Association. So thank you very much, Joe. We also have the summer interns departing today. First, I'd like to recognize John Erskine. John is originally from Arlington, Virginia. He attended the University of Virginia as an undergraduate, where he graduated PBK with a Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry and a second major in Computer Science. So, now that I'm feeling particularly inadequate, he then worked as an analyst for General Dynamics Information Technology before enrolling at Harvard Law School, where he's currently a rising 2L. And then finally, last but not least, I'd like to thank Wyatt Mullins for his work over the summer. He's a rising 3L at Washington University in St. Louis School of Law. Originally from Toronto, Ontario, go Jays, the Canadian takeover continues. Wyatt first developed an interest in administrative law in the regulatory space while serving as a political appointee at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. So he hopes to return to work in Washington full-time after graduation, ideally in the administrative law world, so if that still exists by then. In his free time, Wyatt can be found playing hockey, chess, and watching movies. Not necessarily at the same time, but sometimes, yes. Okay, thanks very much.
Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. I too would like to bid a fond farewell to my interns, who I will make stand up right now. Mary Reagan Phillips and Camila Ramos. Thank you for all your hard work this summer. They have attended ex parte meetings, briefed me on circulation items, summarized comments, helped with travel planning, drafted remarks for meeting items, and written policy memos on complex issues. It has been so wonderful to have you as interns, as my first interns as a commissioner. And I wish you the best as you return to law school, and I cannot wait to see what you accomplish next.
Thank you, commissioners. It's a first. I don't have any announcements. Madam Secretary, that means, will you please announce the next date for the commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, September 26, 2024.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you could please take any outside conversations to the foyer, we'd greatly appreciate it. We're going to get started with the chairwoman's post-open meeting press conference. She'll be giving a couple of brief remarks and then taking any questions we have. So, Chairwoman, with that, welcome to the podium.
And then there was one. I know, it's August in Washington. So we know who really works. All right, Matt, go ahead.
Chairwoman, thank you very much. Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. I'm going to weasel in two questions, if I may. First off, Commissioner Carr had characterized the AI political ads at NPRM as a DNC scheme to control election advertising and disadvantage the GOP. Do you have a response to that? Is it? And my second question, the Democratic National Convention is next week. What are your chairwomanship plans, your hopes in the event of a Harris election? Thank you.
With respect to the second one, I am working hard at the FCC. We're focused on the future and the good work we can do here. And with respect to the first, that has no, that's not remotely accurate. We came up with this proceeding on our own because we have familiarity with what a public and political file looks like at our nation's broadcasters. After all, we've been doing this kind of work for decades. Well, you're talking about a technology that is going to show up in so many aspects of our economy, communications technology included. So it's smart to wrap our arms around these issues, try to understand them, and by issuing this rulemaking today on robocalls and artificial intelligence, that's exactly what we're doing. Sure.
All right, and with that, I will welcome Katie Gorsak for our Bureau press conference.
Hello, Matt. So welcome to the Bureau press conference. I'm going to assume we have questions on all of the items. Okay, so we'll start off with the first one on the Missing and Endangered Persons Event Code from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Alejandra, if you would mind joining us.
Hello.
My pat question I always ask, are there substantive differences between the draft item that was made public and the finalized item that's going to be released?
We're ready for you. So some edits to the final draft occurred when it was in circulation, but none significant to note here. The final report and order will be released with summaries of any ex partes, but I'll flag that none were filed for this NPRM.
So just acknowledgement of ex parte meetings, but nothing that changed the substance of the final order.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. I assume you have a similar question for the AI robocalls.
I do.
Alejandro?
Thank you for that question. So based on request, the commission moved some of the questions from the NPRM to an NOI, which I think was the biggest kind of adjustment that we did. And the commission also made some other kind of minor changes, incorporating additional questions and a slight change to the proposed definition of an AI-generated call.
What was the slight change?
Well, I think we're really working to try to establish kind of a shared meeting point or common language for everything that we are doing. So it really was more about figuring out what everybody was comfortable with, given, I think, I don't want to say infancy of AI, but in this AI moment and realizing that the rate of innovation is really fast. So that's just what the change was, just where we ended up. And that's where we ended up.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and our last item is from WCB on the robocall mitigation database. Okay, Liz?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I feel like the surprise of the question has already been undercut. Any substantive notable changes between the
No substantive changes.
No
After public
substantive.
relations meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Sure.
And that concludes our Bureau Presser. Thank you so much, Matt.